Okay. Hi, my name's Tanya Farrelly, and on behalf of Geelong Regional Libraries, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the third session of the 2025 Local Word Writers Festival. I'm here with my fellow panellists, Belinda Lyons-Lee, Ali Sinclair and Fiona Lowe. And before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the Gulidjan and the Gadabanud peoples of the Maar Nations as the original owners on the lands our library services operate. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and celebrate First Nations peoples of this land as the custodians of learning, literacy, knowledge and story. Before we dive into our panel discussion today, there's a little bit of housekeeping that we'll be doing. So first things first, we'll go for around about 40 minutes, 35, 40 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. If you have questions during that time, please write them down or put them in your phone or whatever, because we love questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible, but we'll wait until, around about 5 to 6 till we open for questions. After that, around 6:30, we'll be heading downstairs for some wine and cheese. There'll be some books to buy if you wish and some signings. We'll feel free to stay around, network, get to know each other and the community. It's really important. And finally, this session will be recorded tonight. So if you at any point want to get back and have a look at what we've had to say, feel free to wait a few days actually before the library uploads it onto their YouTube channel, and also share it with anybody that's interested in writing. So, and if you've got any problems at all with any of that, see one of the library staff. So, with all that having been said and done, we will start with the panel discussion. And the way we're thinking about doing this tonight is that the title of tonight is called The Life Cycle of an Author. And we chose that deliberately because writing, as you probably all know, is a very organic process. And we live in an ecosystem of other writers and publishers and people that have opinions. And I'm sitting here on this side because I've been writing only 7 years. So you can think of me as the caterpillar of the group, if you like. We've got Belinda, who has been writing, and Ali, around about 20 years, so they're already sort of emerging butterflies. And Fiona has been writing almost 30 years, and so she is a master butterfly, and she's busy pollinating everyone else.
That's kind. I thought I might.
So that's sort of why we've elected to call tonight The Life Cycle of an Author. And it's fair to say it does take a fair bit of change and reinvention because you don't want to die and you want to keep going. And so part of this is about reinvention as well. So I'm going to introduce Belinda properly. You've probably all seen her bio from the original ads and things like that, but just as a précis, Belinda Lyons-Lee was born in Geelong. She still lives here with her husband and son, has degrees in youth work, education, writing and literature. Belinda's been teaching English and creative writing in high schools for over 20 years, and she's had a lifelong love affair with 19th century and golden age detective fiction. She's had various articles published that explore writing, vocation, mental health and creativity, and you'll find all of that wrapped up in her novels, including Tussaud, which was her debut novel, published and printed in 2021. And her recent release is entitled The Haunting of Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson, and is just out now. So, Belinda, if you would like to take over and introduce Ali.
Thanks so much, Tanya. I'm now going to introduce you to Ali Sinclair on my left. So this is best-selling and award-winning author Ali Sinclair. She weaves untold stories inspired by real-life women whose courage and defiance challenge society's expectations. Ali's novels capture her passion for storytelling. Born from a lifetime of travel, including working as a mountaineering guide in South America. In addition to writing, Ali teaches workshops and runs the Writers at Sea retreat, where sun and sea spark creativity. Her passion for powerful female-led stories extends beyond the page and onto the screen. This is exciting because this is something we'll talk and hear more about later, but extends beyond the page onto the screen as a film and TV producer and screenwriter. Ali, you are going to introduce Fiona.
Fiona Lowe has been a midwife, a sexual health counsellor and a family support worker. An ideal career for an author who writes novels about family and relationships. Authentically Australian, her current novels are often triggered by a secret, mystery or a dead body, and all three. And they explore the themes of family, community and second chances. Described as gripping, thought-provoking, heartwarming and ultimately uplifting, Lowe's books have been praised for their emotional depth. She is the recipient of the prestigious USA Rita Award, which I'm still in awe of, and 2 Australian Ruby Awards. In September, she's celebrating 20 years since the sale of her first novel. Her most recent release, The Accident, is her 38th book, soon to be followed by The Drowning.
And I'm circling back to Tanya. So Tanya Farrelly is an award-winning advertising strategist and social researcher who spent over 30 years working in the world's leading advertising agencies, telling stories for the world's biggest brands. And in 2018, with a desire to turn her hand from creating brand stories to human stories, she enrolled in the Fiona McIntosh Masterclass for aspiring authors. Tanya's now the author of 2 historical fiction novels published by Penguin Random House, The Eighth Wonder, set in the Gilded Age of New York. I love that book and the cover's to die for. And War of Hearts, which is set against the backdrop of World War I, and both of which were inspired by trailblazing women. She's currently knee-deep editing her 3rd manuscript, and she's married, a mum of 2 adult daughters, has 2 grand puppies, loves travel, coffee, post-it notes, and of course, footnotes. So we're moderating it ourselves, so we're all taking it in turns to ask questions, and I'm kicking off with the very first question. So, ladies, we're all published authors, but we all came to writing in different ways. So, Tanya, would you like to start off? Once upon a time.
Yes, so once upon a time, I was a stressed out ad executive who'd promised herself that she would write a book one day and had got to 50 and still hadn't put pen to paper. And she learned about the Fiona McIntosh's masterclass, which she did. And I think as an older author starting off, you can actually teach old dog new tricks. As part of that, we had to pitch to a publisher, and I pitched to one of the big 4 publishers, and I got this look of complete and utter glazed disinterest back from her, and I thought, I cannot do this. But then the next day, I saw a story. I love historical fiction, as you can obviously see, and I saw a story about a circus elephant that had been abused in the early 1900s. And I wished that somebody had been there to save her. And that's when I started writing The Eighth Wonder. And so that's how I got started.
My once upon a time begins with my childhood filled with reading books and immersing myself in storytelling with my very, very active imagination, which led to me playing around with short stories and poetry when I was younger, but then making a decision after high school to study youth work. Very quickly worked out that wasn't sustainable for me to work in that setting with my temperament. I found that very confronting and draining long term. Pivoted over to being a secondary school teacher because I thought I can share my love of literature with young people. And all the while ticking away writing. It wasn't until I stepped inside a mansion that's local and became completely captivated by the story behind it that I actually sat down and wrote a full-length manuscript. I'll tell you more about that later. And And from then on in, I've just kept on writing. That first manuscript had all the ingredients I love to read and subsequently write about. So it was mystery, it was all the Gothic elements of strangeness, weirdness, supernatural, ghosts, a haunting, yes, some love dynamics, complications, and a sense of otherworldliness, which has brought me to where I am today with my 2 novels. I went back and did some further education, a master's in writing and literature, just to dig deep a little bit more. And here I am, still working as a secondary school teacher in the region and writing on my days off, in inverted commas.
So once upon a time for me, I was a kid who always had my head stuck in a book. I'd write short stories, and then I started travelling and turned my writing to travel diaries. And when I came back after about 8 years in South America, I was interviewed by a radio journalist, and he was asking me all about my stories over there. And off air, he said to me, "You know, have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I'm like, no, I hadn't, but it planted a little seed. And then I think probably a few months later, I saw an advertisement in the Student Travel Association magazine. It was STA. I don't think they're around anymore, yeah. And they were looking for people to write 500 words or less a travel story, and then like the top 5 got selected and put in their annual magazine. So on a whim, I entered it, and it was published, and I saw my name in print, and I thought, ooh, I kind of like that. So then I went and enrolled in a creative writing course, and that was the first time I actually got to meet other writers. And our instructor was fabulous. She'd been published for 30 years. I had a whole lot of different books, and she just really opened my world to the world of publishing, and that's when I started learning about the writing community and the wonderful friends that we make, which we'll talk all about later. But that was the real start of my journey, and I leaned in a lot to my adventures travelling, and my first book, Lunar Tango, is kind of like my love letter to Argentina, where I lived for quite a long time. And yeah, 7, nearly 8 books later, here I am. But the themes are all still very similar. It's, community, adventure, and finding yourself.
And once upon a time, I was a child in Papua New Guinea, and the only entertainment was books, so I was a very keen reader. But I was a bit like Ali. I was a keen reader, but it never had occurred to me about writing a novel. I was an exchange student, and then I did a lot of travel. Remember those blue aerograms that you would... So it was pre-internet, and I was expected to write home every week, which I would do. And then people said to me, oh, you write such good letters, you should think about writing a book about travel. But I was very focused on my career. And it wasn't until I was at home with a baby, and I had taken 7 years to have this child, so I was not in any great hurry to rush back to work full time, and I was trying to work out ways of how I could stay at home and work around the baby. And I had been, about 3 years before I had the baby, a friend, a joke for my 30th birthday, had given me, it always rung and I was in the bath. So I got bath products, a bottle of champagne, my favourite drink, and he threw in a little tiny book, a medical romance. And I didn't know what it was, but I read it, and it was very, very easy to read, and it was very engaging, and it reminded me of The Flying Doctors. And, and I thought, oh, I could write something like that. Didn't think anything of it until I was at home with the baby and heard a radio interview, and they said, we read all these submissions. I thought, well, that's what I'll do. And I knew absolutely nothing. I couldn't format a document. I knew nothing. So, but that's how I started writing. And I think, we'll talk about this a bit later, how it ended up getting published is because I'm anything if not steely determined, and I'd never failed at anything. And this turned out to be harder than all my postgraduate degrees. So.
It's a humbling experience. You get lots of rejection, as I'm sure you're all aware. We're going to skip the next question because I think we've just covered it, you'll be happy to know. And we'll get into the tin tacks of writing and manuscripts. So We talked quite a bit when we were preparing the session about it's well and good to be a writer, but getting published is actually a hard thing to do. So I'm just interested, Belinda, which number manuscript of yours, well, how many manuscripts have you written, and which number did you actually manage to pitch and sell, and how did you go about selling it?
It's such a great question, because I'm always interested in this question from other authors as well. Everyone's got their sort of origin story of how it happened for them. My manuscript To Sow, that was my debut novel, that's my 7th manuscript. So there's 6 others that are sort of rumbling around prior to that. I had, as I said before, I went back and did some further study and was writing through that. My first manuscript was to do with a mansion. I've always been interested in historical fiction and the connection with a crime or a mystery, usually with a female. So I wrote this manuscript To Sow, and I decided I would apply for a, what's the word? It's not a competition at the time. It was a program that was running, nationwide program run out of the ACT Writers Centre in Canberra. And you had to apply for that. You had to send a query letter, a synopsis, and just the first page.
What was it called, Belinda?
It was called Hard Copy. It's not in existence now, which is a real shame, because out of that same group of people that did it that year have come so many writers. Shelley Burr, who writes crime, Hayley Scrivener, who writes crime, Ella, forgot Ella's last name, she writes contemporary fiction. So I applied for this program. They were accepting, so it was nationwide, and they were accepting 25 people into it. So I applied. And at that point, that was a real low for me because, as I said, I'd had 6 other manuscripts that I'd tried to get published and had experienced lots and lots of rejections for. Some really close near misses, but nothing actually over the line. So I remember walking along the path that I used to walk our dog along at that time thinking, you know what, if I don't get into this, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Probably a little bit melodramatic, but at the same time, even though I knew I'd never ever give up writing, I just thought, this is surely this has got to be the break that I need. And it was. I got the email when I was at work and to say, yes, you've been accepted. So I flew up to Canberra twice over the course of a year and worked on that manuscript with the other writers who had been chosen across Australia, all from Australia and all writing very different things, and sat under the tutelage of a couple of mentors there. And then it got 3/4 of the way through the program, and the program gave you an opportunity to apply for the next stage, which was they whittled the 25 down to 10. And if you were successful of the 10, then you would be part of a 2-day series of meetings with agents and publishers, and that was your chance to pitch your work. So I applied for that and put my best foot forward and was accepted and chosen. So now I was one of 10 out of Australia. And the mental preparation for that was enormous, but I showed up for that weekend of 2 days of pitching to agents and publishers, and I was ready. I was just ready to claim this manuscript as the one that was going to be my breakthrough. And so over those course of 2 days, I met lots of agents and had lots of conversations with publishers. The particular publisher that I walked into a room with, I sat down and he said to me, "Oh, Belinda, I really like your story." And I went, "Oh, yeah, great, that's it." And he's the one who I ended up going with. So that is how To Sow, my debut novel, first came to be published, and since then published this second one with this same publisher, The Haunting of Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson.
Fantastic story. And what about you, Ali?
Yes. I wrote 3 manuscripts that will never see the light of day, and I look at them as my apprenticeship manuscripts. I learned a lot with those. So I was a mum with a couple of young kids living in Canada, and my partner was working away quite a lot, so it was a lot to juggle, but I just really needed something for me. So that was probably the main reason I sort of opened up the laptop for the first time. And then I'd gotten close with publishers and agents. I'd pitched my stories, and I always got lots of lovely feedback, but it just wasn't enough to get across the line for someone to say, yes, we want to publish it. So I sent number 3 to an editor at Penguin Random House, or actually they were Penguin, I think, back then in Australia, and she read it and she loved it. But she said it's not the kind of story that we publish. It was a very sort of action, adventure, romance kind of story, and they weren't publishing those at that stage. And she said, have you got anything else? So being the creative person that I am, I've just said, oh yeah, I'm working on this story. It's set in Argentina, and it's got a mystery and a romance, and I'm just riffing. And
making it up as you go along.
Absolutely making it up as I'm going along. And at the end of the call, she said, I love it. Can you send it to me? I'm like, oh, no, it needs a bit more work. And I hadn't even opened it, right? So anyway, I got to work on it, because just having someone interested and the potential of getting it across the line was enough to keep me going. So I actually wrote it pretty fast. And I sent it to her, and then she called me up. She said, won't you come up for lunch? And I'm like, well, she's not going to say no to my face, hopefully. So I go up for lunch. She had all these wonderful things to say, and I thought, this is the moment. And she said, I would love to publish it, but I'm leaving the publishing industry. So I was so close. Anyway, but we actually remained in contact. She actually came to my Melbourne launch only a few weeks ago, so she's still on that journey with me. But in the end, I ended up getting myself a literary agent, who then managed to get a 3-book deal with HarperCollins. And so that manuscript that I got so close with at Penguin ended up getting published at HarperCollins, and I had 6 books with them, and I'm now back at Penguin. So it's the full
Life
circle.
cycle. Yeah, exactly.
I wrote 4 novels. My 4th was the one that I finally cracked it. And I wrote those books over an elapsed period of 10 years. So we moved across the world twice and relocated and had another child, and I did about 3 years in there that I didn't write. And as I said, when I started, I knew nothing. I could barely format a Word document, and in fact the very first 3 chapters I ever sent off to an editor, I sent off single-spaced. Don't ever do that to them. I made every mistake under the sun, and I still got here. But, you can get there faster, I'm sure, if you... One of the biggest problems I had was because I had heard this interview on the radio from Mills and Boon, and because I knew medicine and they published these medical romances, I figured I could write that. But the biggest problem I had was I was great on the medicine, but the only romance novel I'd ever read to that point was Pride and Prejudice. So I didn't even understand the genre. Okay, so as you can save yourself a lot of agony if you actually understand the genre, and we'll talk about this later. I've actually changed directions twice since then, but back then I realised that I needed to learn how to write for publication, and so I joined. We were living in the United States. I joined a writers group over there, and I didn't do a major course like most, but I did lots of short courses and slowly learnt. And I got a phone call from London, and I thought, oh, this is it. This was the 3rd book. Oh, this is it. This will be the call. But it was to say, well, it's nearly there, but it's not quite up to our standard. And it was the 4th book. And what was interesting about that was I had a critique partner, an American critique partner, who was published. And the editor said on that phone call, she said, occasionally your voice seems to disappear. And I didn't quite understand what she meant, but and at that point, my critique's partner's husband was very unwell, so she wasn't able to help me, which turned out to be the absolute best thing, because when I went back and edited that book and deepened all the motivations, my voice came back because the American voice wasn't sneaking in from the critique partner. And so it was 10 years, and it was the 4th book. And I don't have anything in my bottom drawer because I went back and rewrote the previous 3 and they got sold.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think the lesson, before I get on to mine quickly, is the amount of gumption you need to just keep going and to listen to criticism, and also choose who you show stuff to, which we'll get on to. Mine was pretty simple, actually. I wrote my first, sold my first, and had no rejections. But that is... But until, like, I'm coming into my own with rejections very soon, I can tell you. So I'll do my apprenticeship at some point. It was just, I was very lucky at the right place at the right time. And I'd been in advertising, I'd been an advertising strategist. So I did pick my mark. I knew who I was pitching to. It wasn't just the public, it was a publisher. So I made sure I knew the publishers I wanted and I knew their tastes in books. And I wrote to that. So I was strategic. I pitched to 4 publishers at a conference. They all wanted to see the manuscript. I sent out 4 manuscripts to 4 different publishers and Penguin came back first. So, but I kid you not, I will be going through the whole apprenticeship these guys described. I'm sure I've just written my 3rd. I'm putting the finishing touches on now and it's not sold. So, you know, everyone gets their turn at this agony. So, yeah.
Thank you. This is so good, this honest discussion about, you know, the ups and downs of the author life and the cycle of it. Yeah. So in relation to that, I've been doing some thinking about the power dynamic that happens when you are an artist, when you are a creator, whether you write music, whether you paint, or like us, whether you use words. You have a relationship with what you are producing, with your, let's just say, masterpiece. And there comes a point where you want it to go beyond you. It's not enough just to write for yourself. You want to share your writing with other people. And when that decision's made, there's something that shifts in the relationship between you and your work. It shifts again when you have to start being strategic and you have to start thinking about your piece as a commercial product. And when I talked before about showing up to that weekend ready to pitch and it was game on, that's how it was. I stopped thinking about it as this personal, precious, fragile thing and had to start thinking of it as this is a product now and I need to be strategic about it. I need to approach this in a professional, business-like way because this is now something that I want to sell and has to be lucrative for the publisher. However, that brings with it lots of complications because you do have a relationship with your work that is inherently personal. So much of yourself as an author goes into your work, and it's the same for any artistic endeavour, whether it is painting or music. So, Ali, I'm going to ask you, how do you navigate this power dynamic between yourself and a publisher or agent? How much power do you really have in that relationship? What do you say yes to in terms of suggestions or criticisms of your work? What do you say no to? And what do you consider?
Well, that's a loaded one. All right. There were a few questions in there, so if I miss one, let me know.
Just go with
let me
it.
know. I'm really fortunate that I have an amazing relationship with my publisher. With traditional publishing, you sort of have a publisher who's kind of, I guess, like the main go-to person, and then you'll have editors who will work with them and then work with you. I'm very much love getting feedback for my stories. So when editors, send me suggestions on my work, I usually can look at it and go, oh yeah, they're right. There are times where I think, no, I'm dying on the hill on that one. I'm not going to change it. And like in my recent one, I've got a couple of 3 little animals in the story. So I've got Molly the goat and Charlene and Roberta the chickens. And I don't even know why they turned up, but they ended up being kind of like the comedic relief. in the story. And I've never actually written animals in any stories, but these animals just kind of trotted onto the page, and I fell in love with them. And on the first pass, my editor said, "Oh, I don't really think you need them. Like, I think, maybe they should go." And I'm like, no. So then the second pass, I paid more attention to their role in the story. And then when she read it again, she went, "Oh yes, like they can stay." So having trust in yourself and also trust in your editor, because they want you to have the best story possible as well. They want readers to read your story and fall in love with it. But it's also okay to say, "You know what, I don't agree with that." And sometimes I have found when there's been a comment and I've really kind of arced up about it and gone, "No," it's actually made me stop and think. And whether I end up, taking their comment on board or end up staying with what it was, the good thing is it made me stop and think, is this necessary? Is this character performing the role that I need them to? Is this enhancing the storyline? So in terms of that, I guess the power dynamics, I think it's for editing, as it seems to be very even. But, there are also editors who might sort of, I guess, tend to want to have more of a say. So I've been very lucky in that regard. And there was part 2, wasn't there?
I think that'll suffice.
That'll do?
I
Yeah,
think
good.
Yes.
I've been having a think about this. I think Ali mentioned in her story that she got very, very close to selling, and the person loved her book, her voice, everything, but she was leaving the industry. I think when publishing is so subjective, it's not only you. So person has to like your voice, has to like the product, and has to relate to it. So if you're submitting a crime novel to someone who doesn't read crime or whatever, that's not your market. So there's that sort of element that they have to like your voice as the start. But I forgot what I was going to say. So there's also, as I said, I've changed directions a couple of times. One of the reasons I ended up changing direction was because when I first, finally, after the 10 years and the 4 books, it was like I sold this book, yay. And then it was like they expected me to write more. And then with romance fiction, you absolutely have to have a happy ending. Right? Anything can happen between the pages of the book, but it's a total give and it's a happy ending. The person who's buying that product knows that at the end of the book, they're going to go off into the sunset, okay? And and the focus had to be on the couple, and I wanted to write about all sorts of different people and have a cast of thousands. That doesn't belong in that particular genre. So if you're writing genre fiction, you need to know it's not exactly power. Well, it is sort of power because the publisher wants a particular type of product. And so that's when I discovered that I had writing muscles that wanted flexing that I never expected to have. And so I ended up moving on and changing and then starting again. So that was, I guess, because my power thing is the same with editing. We'll talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm quickly going to backtrack and go off-piste and just qualify what I said before, which was, great. I got picked up straight away. The reality is that I also paid for a structural edit on my book before I pitched it, and I paid a lot of money. And I went to Fiona McIntosh, or, it could have been any one of these ladies sitting here, and asked for the best structural editor they knew. And I sent it to her, and she came back with loads of changes. I cut characters, I cut chapters, I cut 30,000 words. And so, I made that sound easy. It wasn't easy, and I put my own coin into it because I figured at my age, being probably the elder stateswoman, I needed to cut to the chase quickly, and that I considered that my university. Instead of paying for a professional writing course, I would go to the source. So, sorry I didn't answer your question. I haven't been in it long enough to have a wrestle. I'm still friggin' delighted that I got picked up. So I'm like, yeah, I'm yours. Take what you want. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, awesome.
I think, Fiona, you were asking the next one.
Okay. Crikey, where are we? Sorry. So we spend so much time working toward being published and honing our craft, pitching the book to agents and publishers and learning about who's accepting submissions. And when we finally get the call to say that we've sold, we're completely euphoric. We achieved that dream, that long-awaited dream, which for some of us has been from childhood. And you think that's it. You think that this is it, I've finally done it. And we have absolutely no idea that this news tumbles us through an invisible wall that we had no idea that existed. And suddenly you've landed up in a completely foreign land with a different vocabulary, and our expectations may not match what's on offer. So Tanya, what do you wish you had known before you sold?
I probably underestimated the amount of work the author has to do, a debut author needs to do in terms of publishing, of promoting their own work. It's basically a lot up to you, and so I had completely underestimated that. I was okay at doing it, but it did take up a lot of time that I thought I would be spending writing my second book. And I think the more you get into that, the harder the second book is to write as well. So I think the other thing, probably 3 key things is, be prepared to do your own promo to start with. Some people get lucky, they get the red carpet treatment. Good on them. And second thing is writing community. I wish I had one when I started, because it would have made life a lot easier in terms of sharing the highs and lows, which we'll get on, and also just sharing information about the industry. And then the other thing, the last thing, which is a craft thing, is the importance of having a really good high concept hook for any book. I just started writing out of complete passion for my subject, but the second book was harder because I was struggling to find that high concept hook. So if who is actually writing a manuscript here? Heaps, okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, have a think about how you're going to pitch it right now. As much as you possibly can, and keep navigating back to that every time you write a chapter or a character. What's the role they're playing in connecting back to that hook?
Publishing expectations. That first manuscript I was telling you about, that I walked into a mansion and was so captivated by the history, I wanted to write the story of it. And I did. That was the first manuscript that I'd completed. And through my husband's contacts, he knew someone who was the head of a publishing house in a capital city. And he asked this person if they might be interested to read this manuscript that I'd written. And they said yes. Now, like you, I wasn't connected to anyone in the writing community. I wasn't part of any writing groups. I was just solitary campaigner. And I didn't realise the enormity of that opportunity. And this was back in the days when you were doing hard copy submissions as well. So I printed out the manuscript like it was a wad of paper, and it went to my husband, and then he passed it on to the head of this publishing company. And I was absolutely, still am, enamoured with this story, and have always loved history and always loved storytelling, and thought that I'd done a pretty good job of telling this story. The manuscript came back, and the manuscript came back heavily annotated. So the publisher had written all over the manuscript, all through the entire manuscript. 2 things worthy of note. First of all, it was read in its entirety. Secondly, this person had taken the time to annotate it. 2 things which at the time, again, I didn't realise the significance of. It was a pass. I was absolutely mortified with this rejection. I was so embarrassed that this had happened. I was so embarrassed I'd written it in the first instance. Who do you think you are to be writing this story? How embarrassing for your husband. You've put him in an awkward position. What is this publisher going to think of you? This is just excruciating. Picked it up, opened the wheelie bin, stood in front of it, and ripped the whole thing up without reading it. It's just no words. I just look back on that. I look back on that younger version of myself, both chronologically in age, but also in writing experience. I had such high hopes and a dream of how it was going to happen for me, and the reality of that was so overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly horrendous, devastating. Yeah, I couldn't deal with it. So there's something to be said for navigating an in-between space where you still have a hope and a dream, and you still believe that that's going to happen, and that's what's propelled me forward through many rejections. But at the same time, like you've said and like others have said here, being prepared to do the work and not see it as a scathing indictment on you as a person or necessarily of your writing experience.
Wow. I don't know how to follow that up. Yes. What I wish I know when I'd sold, or just when I started writing?
Yeah, what do you wish you'd known when you sold?
When I sold, yeah, I think definitely the publicity side of things, and I think. Yes. No, I would say probably that this, what they call it, the second book syndrome. So I was really lucky. I got a 3-book deal, and my first book, I had written it I had completed the first book and had been accepted by the publisher, and then I had to start on the second book. So at the same time as my first book came out, I was writing my second book. But then I got paralysed by fear, because the first book was getting some really great reviews, and it was selling well, and it, it was like a dream. But then it was the thing that's like, well, what if I only have one book in me? What if I can't write a second book? What if this next one, my publisher reads it and goes, no, like, seriously, give us the contract back. So there's that I think we all actually deal with it now, even plenty of books down the track, that whole imposter syndrome.
Oh, book 40 I'm starting at.
Yeah.
I hate it. Blank page. How can I always say, can I do this every time?
I know, I'm about to start or book number 8, and I am looking at the screen at the moment going, can I do this again? Like, there's so much pressure. But so what I wish I'd known was this is actually a very normal feeling. I think nearly every author I know has gone through their second book syndrome, and your third and your fourth and your fifth and your 40th. So and it's a real emotional roller coaster, this business, and that's why it's really important to come to events like this, hear other authors talk about their experiences. You have writer friends and all those sorts of things, because pretty much whatever you're experiencing, there's a really good chance someone else has experienced that, or they're about to, and then you can support them through it.
And
Right.
I'll just add, and this is really the business, it's all very exciting and wonderful. A lot of creative people are so focused on the creative, but you are also a business person, and you have to be a business person. So when you do tumble through that invisible wall and you've been presented with a contract, do not assume that the publishing house is on your side. Okay, publishing contracts are very much in favour of the publisher. So if you don't have an agent, you get someone with a contract experience to look at it. And just 2 things to write down now. I'm not going to go into a great detail, but if you're selling to an Australian publisher, retain your world rights and retain your film rights. Okay, write that down. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I was first.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's all good. So I think one of the things we've sort of touched upon earlier is the importance of being involved with writing groups or writing organisations. And also we're lucky here in Geelong, we've got such an amazing writing community. So I'd love to hear from each of you, I guess, any tips that you might have for people about getting more involved, finding fellow writers, those sorts of things, critique partners.
Want me to go?
Yeah, go for it.
Look, I'm not a group type of person. Some people are. Some people love the social connection. Some people are complete introverts. Pretty much that's me. But can be socially extroverted if I need to be. So I have found a little group that I connect with and some other writers around the Geelong region, and that suits me just fine. I like the resources from the ASA, so the Australian Society of Authors and the Victorian Writers. So if you haven't got those on your hit list, have a look at their websites. They've got fantastic courses and also resources for you to teach yourself. And so do agents, particularly overseas. They all have their own courses. And so if you want to get in somewhere and connect somewhere, look at agents overseas who publish and want your genre, because they also run courses, and that's a great way to get recognised. I'll go online and start looking. There's a... Yeah, so for agents. So I'll get to that at question time, because there is a website you can go to and look them up. Anyway, my final point, we've only got 10 minutes left, so my final point on that is they're very important for connecting with what's happening in the industry and for making connections. And I have to say that is the most important thing in the business, is the connections that you make. Like any commercial business, it's who you know. So enjoy the process of connecting with other writers if you haven't already, and find your little tribe. And there's even the Romance Writers Group, which is a great group. Unfortunately, their conference was this weekend in Tassie, so we couldn't go. But yeah, fantastic resource for information.
In my early days, after I ripped up that manuscript, I did join a writers group. There was probably 5 or 6 other writers. They were all writing different things for different age groups and were at different stages of life. That was the first time I'd been part of a writing group, and I found it excruciatingly hard. Reason being that I was, and that's past tense, but I still am, very driven with my writing. And so I approached it in a way where I try and write every day and devote something. If I'm not actually writing, then I'm researching something, or I'm interviewing someone, or I'm doing something related to that. I found that writing group frustrating, because I'd turn up ready to talk about writing and what had been written, and people they're at different stages as well. They're doing their things. So, there was one woman who moaned endlessly about her cat for the first 15, 20 minutes, and how she couldn't write for a month because her cat was just pawing at the door. And so I found myself over a period of time not wanting to go, but at the same time really wanting the connection with other writers. But then eventually having to question whether that was the best use of my time. So writing groups can be a mixed blessing in that way. What's important is that you find someone that you can connect with in an authentic, meaningful way, and you also have that balance of trust within the relationship. There are people out there, and I've been in groups with them, who will suck the life out of you, and who will suck everything that you have and will not give in return. Okay, will not be there for you in return. I've met some of those as well. So I'm all for collegiality and finding someone, even if it's just one person, that you can connect with, that you trust, that it's a reciprocal relationship, that you're on the journey together, and you can be transparent about the highs and lows of that without all the ego that can sometimes be involved as well. Also, plug for HNSA, which is the Historical Novel Society of Australasia. They're a fantastic organisation. Their conference is coming up in October up in Sydney, which a couple of us are flying up to. And also Sisters in Crime, if you like your crime, mysteries, thrillers, any of that. If you read crime, if you write crime, and they do have brothers as part of the Sisters in Crime. They're in Melbourne, there's statewide chapters. They're brilliant workshops, courses, author talks and events, and they're lots and lots of fun. So I encourage you to look them up.
I think you guys have pretty much covered it. Yep. Shall we move on to another one?
Done. That's you, Tanya.
Me again.
Yeah,
I feel
you're
like I'm
on.
doing a lot of talking here. I'm probably going to skip a few unless have you guys got any favourites that you desperately want to be talking about? The pivoting one, staying published.
Or one piece of advice?
One piece of advice.
You give a new writer?
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of writers here.
Yeah, one piece of advice.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of questions here that we haven't got to. But I do want to say it's interesting about the one piece of advice I've got, and I'm answering my own question, going off the rules again, sorry. But the question is about what advice would you give new writers. So one thing I've discovered since I've been hot and heavy with historical fiction is that historical fiction genre is currently in a bit of a nosedive. And so it pays to know your genres, and if you're desperate to be a published author, also understand where your genre sits in the marketplace. So I'm now thinking, okay, how do I make the most of my first love without betraying it? And so that is to switch into a more of a book club sort of space and introduce contemporary themes in my stories. So that's my advice.
My piece of advice is more around an attitude of perseverance, really. It's just that stubbornness, sheer pig-headedness, a refusal to be told or, back down from something that you inherently believe is what you're on about. So perseverance in the face of the rejections, and then the perseverance in the face of the internal critic, which we've talked about, which can be that voice can be very loud and very strong, no matter what stage you are at your writing career, but persevering.
My piece of advice would be careful who you listen to. So I know when I started out in the early days, I had fellow newbie writers, and we'd read each other's work, and we would, give each other feedback, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I'm still excellent friends with these ladies today, and they're all published. But one of them was like a mystery suspense author, and another one sort of wrote sci-fi. So we all wrote very different genres. So I got some great advice, but the thing was, it wasn't always helpful for the kind of genre that I was writing in. So one was, oh my gosh, she was like the grammar queen. So brilliant, like her advice on grammar was absolutely fantastic. But in terms of, say, pacing in a story that I was writing, because it wasn't her genre, like I knew that yes, it could be helpful, but it may not be the best advice, and vice versa. When I was giving them feedback on sci-fi, I read a little bit of sci-fi, but I'm not a big sci-fi reader, so I probably couldn't give her the best advice on certain things. But also, as you sort of get to know people in the writing world, and you might start swapping different stories. Also, some people cannot be very nice, and they might rip your manuscript to shreds, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with your writing. So, but then other people might say it's absolutely brilliant, there's nothing that needs to change. Well, there's always something that needs to change, and I think all of us probably can agree that even once our books are published, there's probably things that we do want to change anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think as we sort of touched on earlier, just finding your people, and when you do get feedback, just I guess think about their experiences or the different angles that they're coming from, and vice versa.
I think that it's really important to have faith in your writing, because you get hammered from all aspects, you know. So, for instance, I was amassing I've got enough rejection letters that I can paper a wall. In 2010, when I was changing direction for the first time, I coincided with the global financial crisis, and I was targeting New York publishing, and it was completely decimated. And this book that was being shopped out, I got 36 agent rejections. So I had a list and I was just banging through, and they just come back, you know. Some people don't even bother to reply. So you have to believe, you have to have, and it isn't just, I've written it once, you know, if you've done all your due diligence and you've edited it and it's clean and you've had advice and all that and you're shopping it out, you have to maintain that belief that this is story. And what happened with that book was, as I'm struggling under the 36 agent quiz, I got an agent. Oh, yay, I got an agent. Then we got, because it was still the global financial crisis, I had 12 print publishing house rejections. Oh, we like this book, but it's not, or it's this, or it's that. And then, so remember, it's back in the day, there was this thing called an e-book, that it was just starting, and I really did not want this book to be e-published because you didn't get an advance, and there were a lot of these fly-by-night publishers out there. But then a big publishing house started an e-book arm, and I said to my husband, this book is too good to sit in the bottom drawer, so I'm going to submit it. And because I do not want it to be e-published, it will be e-published. And sure as eggs, that's exactly what happened. But what that opportunity, that belief in that book, what happened was they printed 12 copies of it so it could be entered in the most prestigious romance writers competition in the United States, and it won. And so that then pivoted me off onto the next thing, where I thought, you know, I was home and hosed because I got this great deal with Penguin America. Oh, well, that was it. My career was off and running. How many readers are there in America? And then, you know, that was great for 2 years until Penguin and Random House, the two biggest publishing houses, combined, and they sacked 40% of their staff. They didn't get my book out of the warehouse because they were in such chaos for the first 3 months. And then they said, well, you didn't sell many books. So and that's when I went, I've had enough of all this and I'm going to write a book set in Australia, and I changed direction again. But you know what has kept me going the whole time, and you've got it, is that I think I can tell a story. That doesn't make starting it any easier because I lack faith every time I start it. But you have to believe in your product, and that's what's going to get you through the hard times. And a good friend who will, you know, say it's a good book. But yeah, but you don't even believe them, you know, like, and you have good days and bad days. But yeah, do have belief.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love hearing those stories because it is, we see the shining lights of success and we don't realise that they've crawled through the mud to get there. So thanks for being so honest
It's like
about
the
that.
20-year overnight success.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just one last question. This is a 1 or 2 or 3 word answer. What's your go-to craft book that you love to read or to go back to about writing? Anyone got one?
Do the Work by Stephen Pressfield.
Okay, great.
On Writing by Stephen King.
Bird by Carmel...
Anne Lamott.
Anne Lamott, sorry, yes, that one.
And mine's Save the Cat Writes a Story.
Oh, that's excellent.
And
That's
I can't remember who wrote that.
Blake
Snyder.
Sorry?
Blake Snyder.
There you go, Save the Cat. So Save the Cat's a good one. It's very structural. It gives you all the beats. Okay, so I'm going to open this up for questions. And we've got one. Right. Can we get the microphone over?
So after you get rejection slips, what do you change? Do you change the structure of your story, or do you change the way you're writing? You change the voice? Do you change anything?
I'll jump in. It depends who the rejection slip comes from and what feedback is given. Normally with agents and publishers, there's no feedback given. It's just a rejection. And that's if they're going to get back to you at all. Some of them don't get back to you at all, and that's written into their website criteria. If you don't hear back from us in 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, consider it a rejection. So it's just a nice way to say we're ghosting you. But the ones that do get back to you, it'll just be a uniform template usually. If you're really lucky, you might get a personal line or two saying, we particularly enjoyed this, or we've looked at this, or it's gone to an acquisitions meeting but it hasn't got over the line. So it's a good question when you're getting 30, 40, 50 rejections and you're swimming around in that going, well, what's the feedback on this? What do I need to change? Is there something that is inherently flawed with this that I haven't seen? Or do I keep it as it is? And all of a sudden, as Fiona said, it's so subjective. The next person who reads it might go, oh my God, I love this. Don't change it. So I think you were saying before, in the embryonic stages, we're considering who you give your manuscript to and who you receive feedback from. Tanya had her structural edit done first before she went and pitched to her publisher. And similar to The Haunting, for this one, I had someone that I use and I pay money for to get their professional feedback before I do anything with it and submit it. Because then I know if I get a rejection, at least I know I've done due diligence and it's locked in to a degree and standard that I'm happy and satisfied with. Does that make sense? Does that answer that question?
And make sure that you're targeting your submission to a publishing house that's accepting. So read it, because they'll say no poetry, no children. So don't submit that to that. Know exactly what they're looking for, and submit accordingly. Do not throw it to the wall like mud and see what sticks. Be very strategic.
Ali, did you?
No, all good.
You talked about having to promote your own book. What methods did you use for promoting your own book, if you did?
Great question. Well, I had some posters and I had some library talks organised, and a lot of it literally did go through our beautiful resources of the library, and also just Facebook and Instagram mainly. And so trying to do as many talks as you can around the place, because even if it's 5 people, 1 person or 2 people might buy your book or read it at the library, which is also a great resource. So it was really as simple as that, as trying to, and I wrote articles and tried to submit them. The publishing house does give you a publicist for how long, Ali? That's fresh in your mind?
3 months.
About 3 months. So
3 to 6, 3 months leading up and then 3 months after the book comes out.
And what else have you done?
I actually produced, so my last book, The Codebreakers, is inspired by the real life female codebreakers in Brisbane in World War II. And so it was really publicity catnip. And so I was really lucky. I got a lot of great media, but I just felt the story could stretch further. So I actually just ended up cold emailing the producers at the project, because I felt the story would fit really well on there. So I thought, I'll send the email. 2 hours later, the producer called me and she said, can we come and film in 3 days? And they did a really fabulous segment on it. So from that, what I learned was don't let any stone be unturned. And especially if you've got a story that has some really strong social relevance, or it's based on, inspired by a real life story, those sorts of things. Look at your stories and see what would be interesting. What would a journalist be interested in that they could write about that then relates back to the story. So, and don't be afraid to reach out to people in the media, because they're always looking for stories, and you never know if that's the one that they want to run with.
It's also a good idea to have, unfortunately, we need to have a social media presence. Even to the run-up while you're writing, I have a friend who sold to Allen and Unwin because she had a fabulous social media presence before she was published. They picked her up because they knew she had a really good following. Whereas, you know, back in the day when I first published, we didn't have social media. But, you know, and also it's a good idea to have your own newsletter that is completely separate from Meta, and I would spend time cultivating people to subscribe because you control that. Whereas, you know, Facebook could, you know, close up shop overnight. If you've put all your eggs in that basket, you're absolutely screwed. But, yeah, I would have said, oh, you didn't really have to worry about social media until you were published 10 years ago. But now I would say if you're starting writing and you're really serious, you should probably be trying to engage and talk about, well, yeah, talk about your book. I actually don't talk about, I'll say, oh, I'm writing a novel and it's called The Drowning or something, and I might say, oh, I've done some research of this, but I never, ever talk about the ins and outs of the book because it's my story and half the time I don't even know what's going on. But also, I think too, I don't know, there's a lot out there. I think you have to hold tight the essence of your book because otherwise someone will run off and take strands of it. But there's so many other things that you can write about and engage. But yeah, I would start building that now.
And for someone like you, sorry, in terms of the younger, I'm going to say younger generation makes me feel ancient, but, you know, the whole book talk phenomenon got Colleen Hoover everything she's got, you know, and rightly so. But, you know, another struggling writer that got onto social media and onto TikTok and started promoting, and look at her now.
Colleen Hoover didn't actually go onto TikTok. That was actually the readers, and ironically, it was a book that was virtually out of print.
Well, capitalised, yeah. So I think that's an important platform.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add with social media is also connect with other readers, connect with other writers, and be generous in your support with them, because when the time comes, when your book comes out, and if you've got a really lovely supportive community that you've been genuinely, you know, sort of out there waving the pom-poms and supporting their trials and tribulations, then they will likely want to return the favour as well and help get the word out about your story as well.
That's right, but spend more time writing the book than playing on social media.
Oh yeah, you do have to write in between social media.
So my question is kind of related to the whole book talk thing and how you think it's changed the relationship not only between the author and the publishing house, but also the relationship between the author and their reader.
That is a great question that I'm not qualified to answer because I just don't do it.
Sorry, was it about TikTok?
Yeah, about Book Talk and the relationship between the author and the publisher and the author and their reader.
Oh, the publisher would just love you to death if you... They actively encourage us to be on social media. There is an expectation that we will do a huge amount of publicity. So I TikToked, had a great deal of fun with it during COVID, but geez, it's a big amount of time, and so I've pulled right back because, you know, there's a book to write. There's a contract, they expect a book. But they are very happy and supportive of, and they would like you to be there, absolutely. But again, TikTok, it's genre specific. So if you're writing romance fiction, TikTok is going to love you. If you're writing a less or a more obscure genre, it's not going to take off. So it's again knowing your market.
Can I just add on to that? It's a good question about how it changes the relationship, because not all of us feel social media is the natural habitat for them. I'm certainly one of them. So I've struggled with how I navigate social media and the publisher's expectation of how I navigate that when it's not something that I feel naturally drawn to and want to spend time on, because I want to write the book, but also I'm just inherently more private probably and not sure about that space. Other generations behind may feel different about that, but that's just me. So what has been heartening is a number of services that have sprung up to help authors navigate social media. And I can think of a number of them that are doing really well, because they've come alongside authors and have said, you know, social media is not your thing. You want to squirrel yourself away and write, let's organise a TikTok or let's do the Instagram. Let me organise that for you. And it's actually quite reasonable. It's not a big, expensive thing. And so I know a lot of authors who use help, you know, have got help with that, because it's not something that, as I said, lots of us feel naturally it's a playground they want to go into by themselves.
Hi, thanks everyone, it's been great. My question is more about the creative process, and so you have an idea and then you get into the flow and you're writing your book, and then there's a shiny new thing over here because you're like, oh, well that'll be a great story, and then that'll be a great story. So how do you like maintain your focus, or what do you do with those little snippets that could be great stories, and how do you navigate that and just stay on the track and get one book at a time?
You're always going to want to go for that shiny story when you hit the middle part of your manuscript, because your middle part of the manuscript is the hardest, the soggy middle, which you really want to avoid. So and your brain is like, you know, that's hard, so it's going to be going, this is too hard, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, look at there, over there, I'll go and do that instead. So, okay, write that idea down and park it. And because you will always get that, because what you're doing is hard. And there'll be days where I'll come downstairs and I'll go, well, I don't really know what I did today, because it's still not working, or I'm going to solve this scene today. Did you? No. And the drowning that comes out next year, my publisher said, I knew you were having trouble, I couldn't really tell. I said, well, that's good, because there was one scene that took me 4.5 weeks to write. Wow. Okay, because there was stuff missing and I had to go back and write stuff in so that I could. Sometimes you have to go backwards to move forwards. Normally there's a problem because your character's not well motivated enough, or your plot has the problem, but it's during that horrible hard slog. So just write down, have a folder, park your great shiny idea, which may or may not have legs. It's just distracting you to be
Where
honest.
were you when I needed you, Fiona? Because I am guilty of that. And my first book, I think I wrote 300,000 words to get it back to 110,000. So I go off on every direction.
Tell the story about the wolf that was appearing, or was it a fox that kept on?
Yeah,
tell
no,
the story. Tell it.
I can't even remember the story. Anyway, the characters.
I can remember it. Can I tell it?
All right, tell it.
Was it a wolf or a fox? A wolf. See, she does remember. She doesn't want to tell you. In one of our catch-ups, I remember you saying that you were writing this scene and had been struggling with it, and this wolf appeared in your imagination, and it just sent you off on another angle of this wolf. And who was this wolf, and where did it come from, and what type of wolf was this, and was it in the right season for it to be appearing?
What colour was its eyes?
Yeah. And so this whole deep dive into the wolf and why it was there, and could I make this recurring in the story with this wolf, and how could I use it? And so this whole sideways segue into the wolf, which I found really interesting to listen to, but had no role to play in the story. And as much as we quietly maybe wanted it to, didn't quite get there.
I think that's the important thing of seeing the life cycle of an author, because I know I do that now. I didn't know it. I was unconsciously incompetent when I started, and I'm now consciously incompetent. And I'm waiting to get to be consciously competent, and then at Fiona's end where you're unconsciously competent, which is, so that's, that is the phase. And I just went with it. I just kept writing it wrong till I got it right,
But that's not wrong. Sometimes you have... Sorry, Gillian. It's not necessarily wrong. Sometimes you have to write through that to actually find the important bit. And yeah, you have to write through it. And when I get really stuck, which is normally because it's the plot problem, or it's not, I haven't motivated or something, I don't do, you think of on the 40th novel, I'd know to do this earlier, right? But you need to step away from the computer, and I need to pick up pen and paper. I go down, I just relocate to another part of the house with loads of scrap paper, and I will start writing what's going on by hand. And there is something in my brain, probably because how I used to study was I would just write it out, and it will free it up, and then I will go. The other thing is go for a walk, and I find the shower. My family are very used to me streaking across the thing, wet, saying, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, until I found a pen and I've scrawled it down. And I've been working all day, getting nowhere, getting frustrated. I will walk down to the supermarket or I'll get in the shower, and it just unlocks.
Yeah, I was washing the dishes once and came up with the idea for Burning Fields, which was, I think, number 4 for me. And it was just the brain was just switched off. This one started off as a bright, shiny idea in 2017. I had 2 other books I was contracted to write. Thank you. But I did allow myself to sit down and write a synopsis. So I just had to get the idea out, because I knew if I didn't, it would just haunt me, or I'd forget it altogether. And that synopsis just kind of sat there for a while. And then when the right opportunity came, and I was talking to my publisher about, different stories I had like about 4 or 5 different stories to give her, like just outlines, and then we sat through and we sort of worked out which was going to be the best. So yeah, you can allow yourself to sit down and get it out of your head, but then, get back into finishing what you started.
Crime. Crime's huge. Romantasy. Yeah, so they're the sort of things that are trending at the moment. I don't know, have you guys got any more intel on what's...
No, they're the 2 big. I've kicked around for long enough to see the cycle, and that's something we didn't talk about. I mean, yes, you need to know what's trending. So crime's huge at the moment in Australia, and romantasy. I've seen paranormal go massive and come down, but you need to write about what feels right for you. So there are certain genres that over my career have sold to beat the band. Could I write any of those? No, they were not a natural fit for me, and so that's another thing. And also, the market can change. So write what you like to read, write what you enjoy, write what you feel comfortable with, because you just never know when the market's going to catch up with you. And obviously, although crime is big and romantasy is big, they're still publishing other things as well. So otherwise you turn yourself inside out,
And it also shows in your writing. If you're not writing from the heart, if it's not a story that you love, characters that you love, then the writing just isn't as deep and emotional. And I think publishers and agents especially can see that very easily on the page. So yes, it's definitely worth sticking with something that you love. Plus, you're also going to be spending a lot of time reading and rereading and editing. So you really want to be working on something that you love.
One of the things that first of all, thank you very much for your openness and honesty. Absolutely brilliant. You've also all got something in common. You're all working with publishers. And I'm very interested whether you think there's a time and a place for self-publishing, and whether, in fact, you're at your point because of the life cycle that you're in at the moment, and whether there's a life cycle point where perhaps self-publishing plays a role.
I mean, absolutely, self-publishing could play a role and may well do, in my future. I will never say never. And I know I've got good friends who've self-published and done so very well. And I think, but nothing can detract from the fact that if you go into self-publishing, you still got to do those hard yards. And I think you've got a point of view, Fiona, on having a back catalogue of
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
of
right.
books as well.
So I've had 2 agents in the United States, and neither of them have managed to sell my far too Australian books because I'm not 100% crime. I write about family and community, and my books are underpinned by social issues and. Anyway, and they used to be a lot thicker. That was, I think, another reason I had trouble. So, and remember I said retain your world rights? So I always retained my world rights. I only sold my Australian and New Zealand rights to HarperCollins. So when my agent failed to sell the first 4 books that I had written in this particular genre, and COVID gave me the time, my husband and I self-published them into the rest of the world. Now, I have a well-edited... I changed the language? No, it's English. The spelling, sorry. It has to be into American spelling and British spelling for the Brits and American spelling for the... And I sometimes have to take out... back in the day, I used to take out quite Australian expressions for the North Americans. I've lived there, so I understood that. But there's a thing called the Bluey effect, and Bluey's so big over there that the accident, I didn't change anything because, they're learning through their children about Australian expressions. We're taking over the world via Bluey. But what you have to also do is as a traditional publisher, I write the book, I edit the book. The company provide me with the cover, they provide me with a publicist. The book is sold into Dymocks and Kmart and Big W and all the independent bookstores. I'm given a publicist that then arranges all my radio interviews and things. As a self-published author, you'd have to do that all yourself. And then you have to market it. So it's a big job. My husband does all the Amazon ads. That was an entire learning curve. I do not know how to do. That's his job. But I format the books using Vellum. My son is very talented in design, so he does the covers. But it's massive, and I do the Facebook ads. Dear God. And then I'm still writing books for the traditional. So it's a massive job, and the only way self-publishing works is ideally write a series in a genre that's selling, write 4 books before you even start, and then release them 2 months apart, bang, 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 with a big advertising budget. If you self-publish 1 book and you don't follow up for another year, you're going to spend more money getting it up there than making it. So you have to, like anything, you have to be strategic. But yeah, there's the learning curve for self-publishing is vertical.
I've just done that because same as Fiona, I kept my rights outside Australia, and I actually ended up getting all my rights back now. So I've just stepped onto that self-publishing ship, and it's a huge learning curve, but I am enjoying it. But lucky I had 6 books, so I could sort of release them 2 months apart. But I think I would say it's pretty fair to say there's actually it's a growing thing that there are traditionally published authors who now become what they call hybrid authors. So they will self-publish some books, and then they will have other books that are traditionally published. I think that's becoming more and more common.
Okay. Probably time for one last question. Yeah, please. And then I'll do the finishing touches.
I was just wondering about the creative process for the 4 of you. What do you think is your biggest weakness, and how do you overcome it in your writing, if that makes any sense?
Absolutely. I've got 2 big weaknesses. One I've already discussed, which is my ability to shoot off in a million different directions. And the second one I'm learning now is self-doubt. So I think we've all touched on that. Looking at something, and I can't even understand it anymore. It just looks like a collection of words, So taking time away to be able to read it as a book again, not as me trying to agonise over every single self-doubting word.
I'm still thinking. You go.
Procrastination. That's a big one. I think we sort of touched on that before. I have discovered that there are some days where I can be at my desk for 8 hours and achieve nothing. And so a while ago, I heard about the Pomodoro method. I don't know if anyone else has. Yes, I've got a few nods. Excellent. So for those who haven't heard about it, it's there's a whole lot of psychology behind it. But back in the 70s, they had these little tomato timers that you had in the kitchen, and the idea is that you can concentrate with like unbroken concentration for about 25 minutes, and then you have a 5-minute break, and then you sit down for another 25 minutes and another 5-minute break, and then I think that adds up, and then 2 hours it's like a half-hour break. Like, you can do it however it works best. So in that 25 minutes, you don't answer the phone, you don't check your emails, you don't start Googling things that you can go off and research another time, because I love my research, and if I could research all day and get paid for it instead of writing a book, I probably would do that. So anyway, the Pomodoro method I find is invaluable, and sometimes, and it's like, I know it works, and then I forget about it, and then I realise that I've had a week of really not a very good week of writing words, and then I'm like, oh yeah, Pomodoro, and then I get back into it, and then in one day I can achieve what I probably had done the week before without it. So for me, that is really invaluable, and for those of you who are prone to procrastination, I highly, highly recommend it.
I don't know if this is a weakness, but and maybe it chimes in with self-doubt, and I know that you're going to roll your eyes because I have mentioned 40 books, but I really struggle with book ideas. So I'm normally surrounded by authors who are saying, oh, I've got this idea and this idea and this idea, and my next book's going to be this and that. I only ever sign a 2-book contract because the second book is empty. Like, I've sold the first idea, and then it's book 2 and it's empty. If I had to have book 3 empty, book 4, I would never sleep. So, and I wake up every morning thinking, oh God, I owe them a book. And I do go into a tailspin when I've handed a book in, that I've got to come up with another idea. And that paralyses me for a certain amount of time, and then I say, okay. So I go looking for stories. I find, so it's podcasts, and I actually find the Geelong Advertiser is a good source of story, much more than The Age. It's interesting. But yeah, I actually have to go seeking often. Yeah.
Linda, last word.
I think it's that one of the creative challenges I have is that that white hot writing that happens when the creativity is buzzing and the idea is just pouring out of you. That's my favourite bit. I know other people, Fiona, I think you're one. Is it the editing part, the bit you like the best? Someone I know, I don't know
Me.
who. Is it you?
I love it.
Oh, right. So here we go. Because there's so many different stages of the creative process, right? So that's my favourite bit, when the idea is new and it's coalescing for me and it's coming together and I can't get the words down fast enough and my brain's going so quickly my fingers can't keep up. That's my favourite bit. But there's all the other bits that happen before that and after that. And so for me, one of my challenges is to be patient with myself, and also the come down from finishing that creative outpouring can be pretty full on. So when the story's down and done, at least in the first draft, and I've got it pinned down, and I know if I die tomorrow, at least someone will read it as it is and can work with it. Once that's finished, the come down from that can be quite significant. You feel like, I feel like, drained. And
So it's an empty creative well.
It is, yeah, lovely wording. So just accepting that that's part of the process, and then, okay, so then we're getting ready for the next part, which is I'm now going to put on my critical thinking hat and I'm going to be really analytical and I'm going to edit. And this is a different part of the brain and this is a different set of skills and this requires a different sort of energy. And so shifting the gears of that mentally I find, to sort of keep going with their metaphor, they're a bit clunky sometimes, and that's probably a challenge, but nevertheless, it's essential and has to be done. So just moving between those different stages of that creative process can sometimes be a bit tricky.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, ladies, because I've learnt a lot and I actually feel better now than I did when I came here today. I've learned a lot and I feel more inspired. So thank you for the discussion. Thanks to everyone at Geelong Library. Thanks Kaz and Gillian and all of the staff for looking after us and having us here. We much appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for sitting and listening. Sometimes there's peaks and troughs in these things where there's things that you're interested in, things that you don't, but you've all looked very attentive and no one's fallen asleep. So well done. That brings us to the local Word Writers Festival to a close. On behalf of the organisers, Geelong Regional Libraries, I'd like to thank the event sponsor, the Book House, for their generous support, as well as Dymocks Warn Ponds for their involvement as this year's booksellers. We'll be heading downstairs to, if you're interested in buying our books, to sign copies or to mingle or answer more questions. Dymocks will be down there with their pop-up store, which is beautiful. Julie Garner, please thank her for that. And of course, we have this beautiful resource that we're sitting in now to borrow books from, and we as authors love it when you borrow our books. So there's light refreshments, they're being served, and we'll be celebrating the end of the festival. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Always make it.